On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we have an update on the Wan Hai 503 and the Morning Midas. That's right, we have a salvage update. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. That is such a bad joke. I am so bad. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody. That is the worst dad joke I've done in a long time. You can go ask my son. He will confirm that. That's bad. I don't know why we went that way, but we did. But we do have a salvage update that we want to do. We want to talk about the Morning Midas, the car carrier that caught fire up in the Northern Pacific, and Wan Hai 503, which is off the west coast of India. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel. I don't know why you would after that joke, but if you would, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Up to the Northern Pacific and the Morning Midas. You might remember that Morning Midas reported a fire back on June 3rd when the ship was about 300 miles south of Adak, Alaska. The ship was sailing from China over to Mexico. It had a cargo of 3,000 vehicles on board, 70 of them electrical vehicles and 680 of them hybrid. According to a story out by maritime executives, smoke was discovered on a car deck containing EVs. Despite deployment of fixed firefighting systems, specifically the CO2 system, the fire grew in intensity and the master made the decision to abandon ship into a lifeboat. Luckily, weather conditions were moderate, as you can see here, for the North Pacific, and a nearby container ship, a Costco vessel, diverted to rescue the crew. Zodiac appointed Resolve Marine as salver, and a response team got underway aboard the tug Gretchen Dunlap, departing Dutch Harbor on June 6. The tug transited on the north side of the Aleutian chain, then passed between Adak and Kanga Island to head south. Gretchen Dunlap arrived on scene on Monday. You'll notice here the fire still emanating from the vessel. This was taken by the Coast Guard back on June 6th. And note here, you can see some of those burn patterns along the side of the vessel. On June 9th, Coast Guard District 17, that is Alaska, released these photos. Fire has swept throughout the vessel. This is bad situation for the vessel. You'll notice here smoke emanating from the bridge, so that means fire has run through the entire car deck. You'll notice charring and scarring here on the sides. Usually what you see on car carriers is because of the deck configuration, you'll see like the fire run laterally across the length of the ship, but because this is burned all the way bow to stern, top to bottom, this means the fire just broke out of the compartment and was able to run roughshod through the vessel. Here's a midships view of the vessel. You'll see the port lifeboat is still in its davit. They used the starboard lifeboat to jump out. Notice where you can see where the fire really was at its peak levels here. It just absolutely blisters the side of the paint. It's one of the ways you can tell on a car carrier where the fires are, and you can see the temperatures got so high there that just absolutely scorched everything off. And then here on the stern, one of the things you'll see is fire along these back decks. The engine is directly below this stack, so right down below here is where the engine is. Ship seems to be almost on an even keel. It's hard to tell from this angle and the images we're getting from the vessel. But if the fire was able to keep out of the engine room, then flooding may not be an issue. Now, we did see a slick from the vessel initially, and that slick is bad news. That tends to indicate that potentially we're seeing some sort of leakage from the vessel, and if the fire gets into the engine room, what happens is the fire will run through the engine room, and the seals, especially for the water intakes, will burn through, and you can start seeing a flooding of the vessel. However, the Gretchen Dunlop has been on scene for quite a while. So head over to marine traffic. You can see the track that Gretchen Dunlap took, that route along the northern side of the Aleutians. You do that because it's much more protected route to do it, and then you zip out between the islands and come. And you'll see how the vessel has drifted here along. So it's obviously with Morning Midas in its position. The vessel seems to be kind of hung up right here just south of Adak. Go ahead and just pull the vessel's position up on the big route. You'll notice it is right there in that big Great Circle route that runs from China over to the west coast of the Americas. Remember, this is a projection of a globe on a flat surface. And so when you expand it out, the shortest distance between 2 points isn't always a straight line. It is this curved path here. And right now, Morning Midas, we don't have an AIS for Morning Midas. It is when the ship got abandoned, power went off, and obviously burning through the bridge, we have no power on the vessel. So Morning Midas is going to be an extremely tough salvage. The vessel is stuck out in the middle of the Pacific. Weather there starting to become a major issue. Gretchen Dunlap is reporting winds out of the northwest at nearly 30 knots. So you're going to have some pretty high seas at that point. Very difficult to tow the vessel, let alone get on board and do any sort of salvage operation. Resolve Marine, which is a top-notch outfit sent out to do this salvage operation, is going to be very challenged to try to bring this ship into port. It's going to be a tough fight for them. All right, let's go ahead and head over to the west coast of India. This time we're going to look at Wan Hai 503. So firefighting efforts by the Indian Coast Guard on Wan Hai 503 has been outstanding. You'll see here 2 Indian Coast Guard vessels putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, really trying to get that fire out. They've been leading the effort since the fire began on June 9th. This ship is just 44 miles off the coast, and the fire rapidly engulfed the forward stacks on the vessel. This video shows you a little bit of a time lapse here of what happened. According to the Indian Coast Guard, by June 13th of the effort, the Coast Guard had 7 ships engaged in firefighting, boundary cooling, and the continuing search for the 4 missing crew members. I tend to believe that those 4 crew members were involved in the explosion that took place on board the vessel. Remember, we saw images of containers displaced on top of the stacks there. According to the Coast Guard, they were able to get a team on board the vessel and secure a tow line to the stern. They were planning fresh attempts to establish a stable tow line that would be connected to the offshore Warrior, a more powerful platform supply vessel brought in by the appointed salvage company T&T Salvage. The goal is to use the stronger tug to pull the vessel away from the coastline. The vessel is between 38 and 40 miles offshore and drifting to the southeast at 1.5 to 2 knots. This image shows you a tow line set onto the stern of the vessel. The reason they went to the stern, vice the bow, is they did not have fire on the stern. So they're trying to get it and pull it away from the coast. This way, should the ship go down, they will not have an environmental disaster along the coast. However, they are concerned with forecasts ranging up to 50 to 60 knot winds and heavy rains between June 14th and June 16th. So this imagery shows some high velocity, high volume water cannons being used to try to extinguish the fire. The problem with the water cannons are you're putting water onto the ship, so you can create some issues with stability. Other issue is really penetrating down deep into the interior of the vessel. And they actually used a pretty innovative method here to do that. Here we see the Indian Coast Guard helicopters dropping dry chemical bags into the vessel, about 4,000 kilograms of dry chemical. As a volunteer firefighter, we use a similar method when we have chimney fires, where you take bags, literally Ziploc bags full of dry chem from dry chemical extinguishers, drop them down a chimney, and the fire evaporates the bag, and the chemical disperses and starts fighting the fire. You can see the Indian Coast Guard doing the same thing, basically dropping chimney bombs down onto the vessel. This approach allows them to get over the top of the vessel. They avoid filling the vessel with water, so the dry chemical is trying to break up that fire that is on board the vessel. A very innovative way to do this. Here's a position of Wan Hai 503 right there off the southwest coast of India. That AIS position is from June 8th, so obviously it is an old position, but you'll notice here the position of Coast Guard cutters, and here is Triton Liberty. So obviously Wan Hai 503 has been drifting to the southeast, basically paralleling the coast of India. So despite the hot spots and smoke still emanating from the vessel, the Indian Navy was able to get a tow passed over to the Ocean Warrior, and they are beginning to move the vessel. The Coast Guard had attempted to use a smaller tug, the Water Lily, but that proved to be unsuccessful. And now with Triton Liberty there operating under charter, they're hoping to be able to move the vessel into a safe area so that should the vessel go down, they will not have a contamination. What they will try to do at this point is extinguish the fire to a point where they can bring salvage crews on board, determine whether or not they can stabilize the vessel. Then they will decide to bring the vessel into port. Now, this is not the only thing happening off the coast of India. I should make you aware of two other stories that are going on that relate to this, which is a really interesting development because, again, I'm working on a story from Allianz about how much safer shipping is today. And yet here we have not just two issues here, but off the coast of India, there's actually a trio of issues. India's Director General of Shipping is expressing frustration over the progress in the efforts to address the oil aboard the sunken container ship MSC Elsa 3, leading to the issue of a final ultimatum with the threat of criminal liability and legal proceedings. The wreck lies in a depth of 51 meters, which it means it requires saturation diving. Due to weather and issues getting equipment in place, the authorities said that there have been prolonged and repeated delays. This is from the Director General. Quote, the salvors have been issued a strict notice by both state and central authorities to expedite and complete the extraction of oil from the sunken vessel without further delay. They said the final ultimatum was to initiate and complete oil extraction within 48 hours of the June 11th notice. Onshore, there are reports that 58 containers have now been retrieved and taken to port. One additional container they expected would be delivered to port within 24 hours. On Thursday, the Indian High Court in Kerala briefly detained another container ship, the MSC Mansa F, which was at port. Cashew Export Promotion Council petitioned the court seeking compensation for a shipment it had on board the MSC Elsa 3. Mediterranean Shipping Company agreed to post a bond of approximately $700,000 for the claim. The vessel was later released and signals showed the vessel was underway. So MSC Elsa 3 sank off the coast of India. It was a flooding issue on board the vessel. The forward hold started to flood, and then the vessel began to roll, capsize, and the vessel went down. And now the issue is the oil on board and the containers coming loose that are washing ashore. A massive salvage effort that is underway. And as if that's not enough, out in the central Indian Ocean, just south of the Maldives, the crew of a Chinese cargo ship is thankful for a Korean bulker that came to their aid. The Run Fu 3, 32,000 deadweight tons, was taking on water in a remote part of the Indian Ocean when it issued a distress call on Wednesday, June 11th. The ship had departed Singapore on June 1st with a destination as Loma and Togo, where it was due on July 5th. The Korean-managed Maple Harbor, 55,000 tons, was also westbound in the Indian Ocean, having departed Singapore on June 2nd for Italy. The ship received a report from Run Fu at 2:45 a.m. Run Fu 3 reported that one of its hulls had started taking on water and the ship was requesting assistance. Upon learning they were the closest vessel available, the crew of the Maple Harbor changed course. They were able to reach Run Fu 3 at about 5:30 a.m., approximately 3 hours after having received the distress call. The Run Fu 3 reported the crew did everything possible to save their vessel, but at 08:15, the captain made the decision to abandon ship. The 23 crew members boarded life rafts and were rescued by Maple Harbor. According to the South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, 21 of the crew members are from Vietnam, 2 are from Myanmar. They were given water, food, and shelter aboard the bulker. Maple Harbor is proceeding to Port Louis, Mauritius, where its AIS signal says it's due on June 16th. The ministry issued a statement thanking the bulker's crew for their effort. So a great save out there in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It is just, I swear, sometimes it just seems like these things come in waves, and we seem to be in the midst of the waves. The Allianz report for last year, 2024, talks about the fact that, hey, we're doing better. Safety is going up. I will say this, however, that the number of fires are increasing on board ships. And the other issue I have to think is the schedule and the geopolitical issues that are going on around the world. Now, you sit there and say, Sal, what does geopolitics have to do with this? Well, go back to COVID. COVID created a big problem, number one, with getting crews rotated. So we've had a big issue with new crew members coming out and difficulty in retaining crew members. Add to the geopolitical issues with vessels having to route longer distances, ships having to sail longer distances to deliver their cargo, and it just is a wear and tear on board the crews. And I think this is starting to show. Plus, a lot of these vessels that we're seeing are on the older, lower end of the cycle where they should be cycled out and new ships coming back on, but because of the demand for cargo and because we're sailing longer distances, we're keeping these ships out there longer. Add to the fact that we're having this whole other kind of parallel fleet being created, it creates a slew of problems. I hope you enjoyed today's salvage update. That is such a terrible joke. I don't know why I just did it again. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is terrible. We can edit this out, right? No, we're going to keep this in because it's a bad joke, and we're going to keep bad jokes in because that's what we do here at What's Going On with Shipping. Hey, if you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell because you'll get these quality jokes throughout every video here at What's Going On with Shipping, along with shipping updates. If you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you give it a big thumbs up, you share it across social media, and if you can, you support the page by hitting the super thanks button down below or heading on over to Patreon and becoming a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until our next salvage episode, this is Sal, signing off.